Well, anxiety is readiness. And when we anticipate something that could happen in our life that is unpredictable, that we're uncertain about, that we have the perception that something can get worse, we can't control something, we can't predict something, we switch on that very system that gets us ready to do something, to deal with whatever it is that we're confronting. And the problem is that when we begin to forecast as a result of our emotional reaction to whatever it is in our life that's causing that, in a state of stress, in a state of survival, we always select the worst thing that could happen to us, because in survival, if you prepare for the worst, anything less that happens, there's better chances of surviving. So the innate mechanisms of the survival system causes us to move out of balance, and we imagine what would happen in the worst way. And out of the infinite potentials that exist as a possibility, we select that worst one, but that's not the end. We begin to literally emotionally embrace what it would feel like if it did happen. And the feeling that goes along with that outcome is fear. It's anxiety, it's worry. And the body's so objective in that moment that it's believing, it's actually living in that future reality in the present moment.
The one that sucks.
Yeah, it does not know the difference between the real life experience and the one that we're imagining. And so the body's actually living that reality. It becomes an issue if you do it enough times, that it's that thought and that feeling, the image of that future and the emotion that's associated, that stimulus and response, that's conditioning the body to become the mind of that emotion. And now it becomes subconsciously programmed. Try as you may to control it with your conscious mind, which is 5% of who we are by the middle of our lives. We've programmed it subconsciously. So then the moment we're living in vigilance, the moment we're living in fear, the body's getting an arousal. And that arousal becomes like a drug, and we overdose. And the body is using, the body is responding to the mind, and it's using those chemicals to wake up. It's using those chemicals to become more conscious, to become more aware of what? Something bad could happen in our lives. So now we're constantly anticipating the worst case scenario, and now the body is constantly programmed into that state. Conscious mind has no rule over what has been programmed subconsciously. In fact, the body now is the mind of anxiety. So the person is always sweeping the environment to look to see what in their life could actually go wrong. And they're living from that state constantly. In that state, we're living in lack, we're living in separation, and we're trying harder, we're working harder, we're fighting for outcomes, we're controlling outcomes because we're doing everything we can to stop the worst thing that could happen in our lives. Now, it becomes an addiction, and addiction is something that you think you can't stop, or an addiction is knowing something isn't good for you and doing it anyway. And so the person now starts to use the problems, the challenges, the adversity, the conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. They need difficult circumstances, they need the bad job, they need the poor relationship just to continuously feel that feeling, to torment the body, to constantly live out of balance. Now, if you keep doing that for an extended period, your brain gets very disorderly, gets very modulated, very compartmentalized, very divided. You keep doing that, and your body's physiology stays out of balance. And that imbalance becomes the new balance, and now the person's headed for some type of breakdown in one of the systems in their body. In other words, the body can't tolerate living in emergency mode for all that time. It's going to run out of energy. It's not going to have order. And that autonomic dysregulation becomes a person's constant state of being. So now they do their best to try to make that feeling go away. But the problem is they have no understanding that they could actually change that without relying on something outside of them. And so the person uses the drug, they video game, they do something.
A lot of drinking.
A lot of drinking to regulate that feeling, because that's the best way to take away that lack or that separation, or sedate the body enough where they can feel free. The problem is when you feel the anxiety, the brain automatically looks for the solution from last time. And so then the person becomes dependent on their outer world to change their inner world. And this is where, in time, people need to do more and more of the gambling, the video gaming, the shopping, to try to make that feeling go away, or whatever it is that they do. Nothing wrong with that. But sooner or later, the person has to really look to see if they can change. So the anxiety then, in a state of readiness, causes the brain and body to stay on an idle, on a higher idle on a regular basis. Now, some people use that anxiety, a healthy form of it, to do something, to complete something, to take away the anxiety. There's nothing wrong with that. You're taking a test, you got an exam, you're a little vigilant, you're a little nervous. That's kind of a good amount of anxiety that's telling you you're ready, you better use this energy and do something with it, like study, like prepare, like learn. And the more you study, the more you prepare, the more you learn, you notice that those thresholds start to go down, and you're taking care of it in some way. You go to the test unprepared, you get over anxious, or you remember the last time you failed, you can't concentrate now because you can't focus on learning when you're living in survival. It's not a time to learn. It's time to run, fight, and hide. And to change is to think, act, and feel differently in the same environmental condition, and to do it enough times that that environment begins to change because you're changing. And nothing changes in your life until you change. I think so many people walk in to do the meditation when they leave this place, and there is an energy, there is the spirit of change and transformation present. It's very infectious. Our research shows people change people. And when you're kind, other people are kind. When you love, other people love. When you're caring, other people care. It's an emergent consciousness in so many ways. And so, to me, that's the feeling you should strive for. That feeling right there is the feeling you have to get up when you finish your meditation. You gotta get up feeling that same feeling. And you gotta remember that feeling enough times that you can bring it up on your own. Because if you can't, you won't be able to bring it up on your own. And nobody's going to give you that feeling in the end but you. So I don't care if it takes an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours for us to get there. I just know that when I do get there, I'm so happy that I do. And if it takes that long, I swear to you, when it's the hardest, it matters the most. So the excuse that we can give on a regular basis is to shrink back into mediocrity and to say, I need the event to do this. Well, that's just another thing that we are unconsciously agreeing to and believing, that it's better to do it in a community than to do it on my own. Well, if you truly believe in the quantum model, by you showing up, there is a collective consciousness that you can tap into every day. Every day. You don't have to be in the presence to move into that momentum. And so, God, taking a little time for ourselves every single day is such a service to the world. Being alone without your device or without any stimulation and really getting ready to do your meditation. I would never sit down and do my meditation until I was very clear in my think box how I was going to do it, what I wasn't going to do, who I wasn't going to think about, the things I know I'm going to get to anyway. What am I going to do if this thing comes up? How am I going to move through this? I got 1,000 thoughts, 1,000 decisions today. I got too much going on, all of that stuff. That's when you immerse yourself back in the world. That's when you leave the monastery and return back. And you got to start reminding yourself the thoughts you're not going to think. You got to become so conscious of those unconscious thoughts that you don't go unconscious to them and believe them. You got to become super aware of how you're speaking, how you're acting, what you're saying. If you're complaining, if you're judging, like that's not who you truly are. You gotta think, okay, what emotions bring me down to that place where I seamlessly go unconscious and we default back to that old personality. That's the same. That feeling is the past, and I'm going to believe I'm in the past, and I'm going to behave like I am, and I'm going to think like I am, and I will be in my past. Okay, how many times am I going to do that till I stop doing that? This is the work. And then how do I want to think? How do I want to program my mind? How am I going to create a new belief? Let me put my intention and my attention behind it and repeat it enough times until I remember to think this way. It's not that hard. What choices am I going to make that I know that I could possibly not want to make? Let me just remind myself of the choice I'm going to make, the thing I'm going to do. Let me review it enough times so I remember to do it. Even though if I don't want to do it, I'm going to do it anyway. Let me rehearse it. Rehearsing is priming the brain for the action. It's changing the brain to look like you already did it. How am I going to feel? When I get up from this meditation, how much love for my future could I be in? And let me remember this feeling. If I have to remember it 1,000 times, I'm going to keep bringing it up, so I can bring it up on my own. That's the work. And so making time for our precious selves, to love ourselves enough to disconnect from our life long enough to change our life, to disconnect so that we can reconnect. If people get up from their meditations and they believe less in their future than when they started, it's because they didn't overcome the feeling of themselves, the habit of themselves, the hardwired belief, perception, or attitude. Some people actually do this work and they believe more in their future when they get up in that state. And the people who fall from grace, I've done it enough times. If you're truly committed to that future and you defaulted back to the old personality, you got one of two choices. Stay there and find somebody else who's doing the same and use each other to reaffirm your addiction to victimization and call that normal. And that's a social agreement that we make. But the person who separates the sacred from the mundane says, in the light of all eternity, it's never going to be the right moment, especially when I feel this way. Let me take a break here and let me get back into the feeling of my future so I can believe it again. And when it's the hardest, it matters the most. If I didn't have that accident, I wouldn't be sitting here. What if the worst thing that happens to you in your life is the best thing that happens to you in your life? And I was a pretty bitter person. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want anybody's pity. I didn't want anybody tell me what they thought was going to happen to me. It was a chilling moment, that dark night of the soul, when you realize that nobody has the answers to your life but you. This is where you have to believe in yourself. And it's not a linear journey. It's not a linear journey where you go from point A to point B. There's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of sleepless nights. There's a lot of worry. There's a lot of everything when you're left with you. And I think, though, that we are all faced with great opportunities that are brilliantly disguised as impossible situations. And we have to meet the challenges in our life constantly from a greater level of mind. And so what has emerged out of all of this is just a community of people that believe in possibility. They're not believing in the known. Nothing new is in the known. They're believing in the unknown, and they're proving to themselves that it actually works. And I want everybody to experiment with it, because I think that everybody is included. And so the outcomes that we are creating right now is a testament to the understanding that people are more informed about possibility to this day. And I'm so happy. I never really tell the story. I ask in most podcasts to never really talk about my injury, because I never want it to be about me. I really don't. I mean, I want it to be about our community. There's better stories than that to me. There are people that are healing from stage 4 cancer. There's blind people seeing. There's deaf people hearing. Stage 4 cancer that spread to the bones, to the lungs, to the liver. People with muscular dystrophy, ALS, spinal cord injuries, myasthenia gravis. all kinds of chronic health conditions, people growing thyroids back. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that. And so I never want it to be about me. I want it to be about our community. I want it to be about us, in its collective networks of observers with brain and heart coherence that really begin to affect reality, and we have data to prove that as well. So once you see the person on the stage, that's the 4-minute mile that's telling the story of their own personal change and transformation. They've broken through some level of consciousness or unconsciousness. They're showing the collective that it's no longer theory. It's no longer philosophy. They're the example of truth right in front of you. And I love that they come in all sizes, all shapes, all colors, all ages, all professions. And those people do the work. They do the meditations, not to heal. They do the meditations to change. And they understand that when they change, they heal. And so the process of change then, becoming so conscious of your unconscious self, to know thyself that you wouldn't go unconscious, if you can cross that river of change, there will be new opportunities. There will be new synchronicities, new possibilities that begin to show up in your life because you held on to that intention. Independent of what people think of you, will always be considered foolhardy and insane because they don't believe it. And they will consider you a fool. They will consider you a heretic, a charlatan, until you pull it off. And once you pull it off, you're a mystic, you're a saint, you're a genius. And daring to be original in this time is so important to understand that the world can be sweeping and moving in one way. And there is never in my life have I seen the world as it is today. And yet the problems in this world that were created from a certain level of consciousness, but must be resolved from a greater level of consciousness, and that's our future, our youth. That you have to be able to stand up for truth and face off with adversity and be able to be relaxed in your heart and awaken your brain and not compromise in any way, to not give up on that future. I promise you there are more of you. And I believe that if you change enough people, you can change the world. And that's when you get out in the world with your eyes open and you show the world what love does. You show them what greatness is. You show them what a new invention is that can change the course of the world. And I just want it to be equally about you. I never want this work to be about me. I had my own journey. I'm still on my own journey in so many wonderful ways.